Yo, welcome back to the Nucleogenesis Project. If you don't know who I am, my name is Dr. James Utley, and I'm your resident codebreaker data scraper here, and I represent the Syndicate Laboratories, which is a conglomerate of research going on here. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to go over the Nucleogenesis Project, and I believe we are on part four of nucleogenesis. So, what is nucleogenesis, real quick? Nucleogenesis is a temporal framework for eukaryotic nuclear blueprint archival and reconstruction. Again, it's a mouthful. What it means is developing a digital file of a nucleus that can be used in the future for a synthetic biologist to then be able to reconstruct a nucleus. All right, so as part four, we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which is getting into part two here. Part two otherwise is dual stream sample acquisition and management, right? So if you haven't, you can go back and watch the prior videos for part one and the primer and the abstract. But right now we're going to talk about part two, which nuclear sampler. This is about the Nucleo sampler. So Nucleo sampler, this is version 2 of it, extends the original chain of custody paradigm into a unified provenance and integrity framework designed explicitly for temporally decoupled nuclear data acquisition. At the point of collection, the system manages a paired biologic fraction. So if you remember, we were talking about those two fractions that are important, right? So that's the fresh cellular material designated for immediate architecture. That's the dependent assays for immediate sample analysis, and then you have the architectural dependent assays, that is the dried blood spot cards designed for long-term archival and deferred analysis, so analysis in the future. So to preserve the logical continuity between these two fractions across a period of time, the Nucleo sampler enforces cryptographic provenance linked at the moment of partitioning. So it uses the blockchain technology, or that's the idea. It uses a cryptographic public blockchain that will then fractionate fresh and the DBS portion, or so the long-term architecture, and each fraction is assigned a unique tamper-evident identifier derived from a shared cryptographic root. So you got the main sample, and it parses it into two fractions, ensuring that the downstream data set, whether generated immediately from fresh material or years later from the DBS reanalysis, can be unambiguously associated with the same originating biological sample. So again, this is architecture, or this is an anchor architecture, which means that you have testing that provides you your anchor, and then you're building on top of it. So how do you do that? And knowing what's going to happen in the future, you have to have some cryptographic paradigm that will then match the two fractions to the anchor. And that's so this linkage persists across arbitrary temporal intervals and analytic modalities. It enables reconstruction workflows to integrate fresh derived structural priors with archived genomic and epigenomic data without the ambiguity, without reliance on external metadata. Like, that's the thing. It binds the biological material, the analytical outputs, and the time separated process events into a single verifiable lineage. Nucleo sampler is basically the program that transforms sample handling from a logistic operation into a foundational component of information integrity within the nucleogenesis framework, right? So what it does is it is an application that will intake the sample, have some quality control metrics, which means making sure the sample is good enough, then busts it into two fractions, and then cryptographically assigns it to an anchor, which is your base data layer. So now, acquisition event formation. So an acquisition event represents a fundamental unit of biological collection and provenance within the nucleogenesis framework. It captures in a single immutable record the identity of the biological source, the time, the conditions of collection, and the complete set of material fractions derived from a single blood draw. And here's the math proof, meaning how we proof it out via mathematics, where each element encodes a distinct and necessary aspect of the provenance. All right, and we're going to move to the next page here. And again, it shows that E is a vector describing the environmental conditions at the time of collection, including temperature, humidity, and ambient pressure. So we have our E here. We have a donor ID. So if we look at this, right, so we have our donor ID. We have the time of collection. And then we have this E vector now, which binds the biological identity, time, and environmental context into a tamper-evident hash. Any post-hoc modification to these fields invalidates the signature, ensuring there is provenance integrity. each biological fraction, as denoted by this character here, derived from the acquisition event, is itself explicitly modeled to capture both its physical properties and its analytical life cycle. So if you see here, it has some more examples, and you can read all of these. But together, this representation ensures that each acquisition event, meaning getting the stuff, functions as a self-contained, audible provenance object by explicitly modeling environmental context, fraction identity, and assay state. This framework enables temporally decoupled analysis while preserving unambiguous lineage between fresh derived measurements and archived DBS material. This structure allows for future reconstruction workflows to reason explicitly about the information that was captured, what information remains recoverable, and what information was irreversibly lost at each stage of the sample life cycle. So basically, it's a ledger that controls all of these things that you can have a basis of stability to then make the future steps on top of, right? So with that, we're going to stop right there. And our next section here is fraction-specific processing protocols, which you see here. It's going to be pretty cool. It's got all the assays here. We got our specimen types. We got our maximum delay in temperature. We got a maximum delay in hours, and we got our temperature. So we'll be getting into the fresh fraction processing next. And each one of these sessions builds on the last one. So go check out the ones that are prior. This is part 4. And again, my name is Dr. James Utley, and I will see you in the future. You can read this paper at syndicate-labs.io, syndicate-labs.io. And again, my name is Dr. James Utley. Peace.